There is a moment that often comes quietly, not on the day you retire, not at the party or the last handshake, but later, when the house is still, when the calendar looks different, when the sound of the day changes. You sit with your coffee a little longer. You look out the window. And something inside you notices the silence. Not good or bad, just different. I remember that moment clearly. I didn't name it then, I just felt it. Retirement is supposed to feel like relief, like exhaling after a long walk. And in many ways it does. No alarms, no rushing, no deadlines tapping on the shoulder. But beneath that relief, there's often something else. A soft unease. A question that doesn't use words yet. You tell yourself you earned this. You worked for decades. You were careful. You planned. You did what you were supposed to do. So why does your chest feel tight some mornings? Why do you hesitate before making small decisions? Why does spending feel heavier than it used to? You don't talk about it much. You don't want to sound ungrateful. You don't want to worry anyone. Friends ask how retirement is. You smile. You say it's good. Because it is. Mostly. But later, alone, you replay the question in your head. Is this how it's supposed to feel? In my first year retired, I had many good days. Long walks. Slow mornings. Time I never had before. And yet, there was a tension following me. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just persistent. I noticed it when I stood in a grocery store aisle longer than necessary. Not because I couldn't afford what I needed, but because I felt watched by my own thoughts. I noticed it when I delayed simple plans. Lunch with friends, a short trip. Small comforts I once enjoyed without thinking. I told myself I was being responsible, careful, wise. But deep down, something felt off. You might recognize this. That feeling of holding your breath without realizing it, of guarding instead of living. Retirement changes your relationship with money in a way that one really prepares you for. It's no longer something you earn, it's something you manage, something finite in your mind, even if it's adequate on paper. Before, money flowed in. Now it flows out, and that shift touches something emotional. You start measuring time differently. And you start measuring yourself differently too. Am I being too careful? Or not careful enough? What if something happens? What if I misjudge this? You don't say these things out loud, but they sit with you. During my first year, I kept waiting for confidence to arrive. I thought it would come with time, with familiarity, with settling in. But instead, I felt smaller around my own life, more cautious, less trusting of myself. I had planned my finances, but I hadn't planned my emotions. I hadn't realized how deeply my sense of safety was tied to earning, to knowing another paycheck was coming, to feeling useful in a measurable way. When that ended, something inside me felt exposed. I tried to control that feeling the only way I knew how, by holding back, by saying no before even considering yes. I told myself it was smart. I told myself it was maturity. But slowly, quietly, joy began to shrink, not disappear, just dim. I didn't notice it all at once. It showed up in small ways. Less laughter, less spontaneity, more mental calculations, even rest began to feel conditional. You may know this space, where nothing is technically wrong, but nothing feels fully right either. People around you might say you're lucky, and you know they're not wrong. But luck doesn't cancel uncertainty. In the first year, retirement still feels new, fragile, like something you could break if you move the wrong way. You don't yet trust the ground beneath your feet. I spent that year trying to protect myself from future regret. Ironically, that's exactly where my biggest regret was forming. It wasn't about a purchase I made, or one I didn't. It wasn't about a bad decision or a mistake on paper. It was about how I lived that year. I lived it like someone who was afraid to settle in, afraid to belong to this new life, afraid to fully arrive. I treated retirement like a waiting room instead of a home. At the time, I didn't see it. I just felt tired in a way rest didn't fix. Have you ever noticed that kind of tired, the kind that comes from holding yourself back? It wasn't until later that the insight came gently, not as a realization, more like a soft truth finally landing. The regret wasn't financial in the traditional sense, it was emotional. I had spent my first year retired trying not to lose money. Instead of learning how to live with it, I confused safety with stillness and caution with wisdom. But retirement isn't about freezing life in place. It's about learning a new rhythm. That first year, I didn't allow myself that learning. I stayed in defense mode. Looking back, I see how normal that was, how human, how understandable. You spend decades being careful for the future. Then suddenly, the future becomes now. It takes time to adjust. The problem wasn't that I was careful, it was that I didn't trust myself anymore. I stopped believing I could adapt, that I could respond if things changed. that I'd already survived far more than I gave myself credit for. When that trust fades, even abundance feels fragile. The shift didn't happen all at once. It happened slowly, through reflection, through conversations, through watching other retirees live differently. I noticed those who seemed most at peace weren't reckless. They weren't careless. They were settled. They had accepted that retirement isn't a test you pass or fail. It's a chapter you learn as you go. They allowed room for adjustment, for small missteps, for changing their minds. They didn't expect perfection from themselves. That's what I missed in my first year. Gentleness. I treated myself like a fragile system that could collapse with one wrong move instead of a capable person entering a new phase. Once I saw that, something softened. I began asking different questions. Not how do I protect everything, but how do I feel safe while still being alive? Those are very different questions. Safety isn't just about preservation, it's also about confidence, about knowing you can respond. When that understanding settled in, the regret lost its sting, but it didn't disappear. It became a reminder that the first year matters, not because of what you spend or save, but because of how you treat yourself. If you're in that first year now, or even beyond it, this isn't a warning. It's reassurance. If you've been cautious, if you've been hesitant, if you felt unsure, you haven't failed. You're adjusting. An adjustment takes kindness. You're allowed to learn your own comfort. You're allowed to recalibrate. You're allowed to realize something isn't working and gently change it. Retirement is not a single decision. It's an ongoing conversation with yourself. And conversations evolve. The biggest financial regret of my first year retired wasn't about money leaving my account. It was about life leaving the room while I was watching the door. I didn't lose anything tangible, but I delayed presence. That's something you can always return to, no matter how long you've been retired. You don't need to rush. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to notice how you're holding yourself. If your shoulders are tight, if your breath is shallow, if joy feels conditional. Those are signals, not failures. Signals inviting you to soften. Retirement is not something you must get right immediately. It's something you grow into, and growth at any age deserves patience. As I look back now, I don't feel shame about that first year. I feel compassion. I see someone who cared deeply about security, who wanted to do the right thing, who simply needed time to trust again. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And if there's one quiet truth I carry with me now, it's this: you don't protect your future by shrinking your present. You protect it by learning how to live fully and wisely at the same time. That balance doesn't arrive all at once. It unfolds slowly, gently, just like retirement itself.